G'day whiskey lovers, welcome to the Hard Malt channel. My name's Tim. Just thought I'd clarify in case some of you thought it was Ralphie from the Whisky Bothy. Just paying homage with the cap I purchased in Edinburgh last year during my Scotland trip, and I thought it was appropriate given this is my tips for your Scotland trip video. As some people will know, I did quite a trip last year in May, which was late spring UK time, and I picked up or worked out a few tips and tricks. Spoke to a few different people that had been to Scotland before, and so I've put together a handful of tips that I think anybody should know and keep in mind when they're planning their trip to Scotland and or Ireland. I'll start off just briefly explaining where I went last year in May, and I'll put a map up as I describe this. I started my trip obviously flying all the way out from Australia, nearly 24 hours of flights to get there, and flew straight into Dublin. My plan being, if I'm going to have any jet lag, I'll be able to drown it in some Guinness. And I didn't have any jet lag, to be honest. Well, perhaps a little bit, as in I didn't have any super late nights, but let's be honest, I'm middle-aged. I'm not a night owl type person these days, and I was up early each day as well. But for me, that suits me down to a T. If I can be up early and walk around a new city that I haven't been to before, and explore before it gets super busy, that's all the better. You can get some awesome photographs that way, getting up early and exploring a city before it's crowded. So as I said, I started in Dublin. I was there for a couple of days, took a detour over to Galway, a day trip to Galway, check out the west coast of Ireland, then back to Dublin and headed up to Belfast. Stayed in Belfast for a couple of days. I picked up a hire car for just a day hire in Belfast, and made a beeline for Bushmills Distillery up there, as well as checking out the Causeway Coast, checking out some of the castles up there, Dunluce Castle, which featured in Game of Thrones, and had a lovely drive all the way back down the Antrim coast back to Belfast. From Belfast I then hopped on an Aer Lingus regional flight across to Glasgow. Spent a couple of days in Glasgow, explored the city. I went to the Potstill, I went to the Bon Accord, of course. It's a must-do for any whiskey fan. From Glasgow, after a couple of days, I picked up my hire car for a week and headed straight off down to the Kintyre Peninsula and jumped on the ferry across to Islay. Did my pilgrimage to as many of the Islay distilleries as I could get to, and in particular an Islay distillery you may have heard of before called Bunnahabhain. One of my favourites actually. So I did the distillery tour, the production tour, and the Warehouse 9 tasting at Bunnahabhain, which was thoroughly enjoyable. You might see a little bit of that coming up at the end of the video, and I'll speak about that later. From Islay I came back across to the Kintyre Peninsula and down to Campbelltown, of course, to pop my head in at Springbank and Glen Scotia. Then next it was up towards the Highlands. I travelled up through Glencoe, stayed in town near Ballachulish, or is it Ballachulish? Somebody will tell me. Just outside the main stop in Glencoe. Absolutely wonderful scenery in Glencoe. That was probably my one non-distillery day, that particular stop, and then it was off of course, up into the Highlands, into Speyside, and I stayed in the town of Warbelau. And of course, in the heart of Speyside, you're spoilt for choice for all the distilleries you could visit. So I spent a few days in Speyside, and had an absolutely enjoyable time up there. So lucky with the weather throughout this entire trip, to be honest. I had 2 days where there was a bit of drizzle. One of those days was the day that I arrived in Campbelltown, but the next day it was perfectly sunny. And the other drizzly day that I had was the day that I was leaving Scotland, so it didn't make any difference anyway. 20 degrees we had up in Speyside in late May last year. That was absolutely perfect. After Speyside, I came back down through the Highlands, through the Cairngorms, and poked my head in at Balmoral Castle, and then continued on down to the Fife coast, where I stopped at Pittenweem and also Kirkcaldy. Stayed the night in Kirkcaldy. That's where my great-grandpa Mackenzie was born. So had to stop there and have a look. Had my first taste of haggis at the hotel in Kirkcaldy. Absolutely delicious stuff. I'm hooked. Then it was off down to Edinburgh, hand back in the car, and stayed a couple of days in Edinburgh. Checked out the Royal Mile, of course, Edinburgh Castle, all the hot spots in Edinburgh. Had an awesome time there, and great food, great whiskey. And then it was off. The next day, I continued leaving Scotland down to Newcastle upon Tyne in England, and then eventually down to London, where I finished the trip in London. So that's a wrap up of where I went. Now, what did I learn? What did I pick up? What tips did I already know when I was planning this? So, I spoke to a couple of people, whiskey fans, in fact, that had recently gone to Scotland. Some had been just the once. Some had been a few times, in fact. But it was good to get some of their advice, what they've done, etc. So I'll put together roughly 6 or 7 tips that I think are useful for you guys to know. So I've just written some notes. So the first one would be, when you're planning your trip, of course you're going to plan it around the distilleries that you want to visit. That's natural. That's what I did. But once you've picked out the distilleries that you want to visit, and you're probably not going to be able to do all the distilleries that you would want to, so you're going to narrow it down to, for me it was roughly half a dozen or so. As it turns out, I managed to pick up a few more, just to stop in and have a look. Not necessarily a tasting or a tour, but as part of sort of paying homage to the whiskey that you love, a bit of a pilgrimage perhaps. It's always nice to stop in if you can, even if it's just to have a look at the shop and pick up a sample bottle to take with you. But having said that, yes, you're going to plan around the distilleries you want to go to, but don't forget everything else. Don't ignore the scenery. Don't ignore other attractions. There's thousands, hundreds of castles that you can visit in Scotland, and they're all in various sort of states of. Some are quite ruined, some are quite maintained, some have been restored, but they're all incredible to see. And some of them you can go right up the towers and explore and go for your life. So don't forget the castles, don't forget the mountains, which again, it's all about the scenery in Scotland, the tranquil nature. There's so much untouched scenery in Scotland, it's just incredible to see. And small towns. Don't forget to stop at the small towns. Some of the small towns are just so quaint and pretty, and you can find excellent cafes, get good coffee, great food, and meet local characters as well. So don't make it all about the distilleries, is what I say. Yes, that's what you're going for, 50%, I suppose. But yeah, don't forget, don't neglect anything else, because yeah, you'll thoroughly enjoy it. Now, related to this is if you are driving, as I did, I picked up a car and drove from Glasgow all the way up into the Highlands and Speyside and then back down to Edinburgh. If you're driving, don't plan to drive more than 3 hours a day maximum. 3 hours doesn't sound a lot, but when you think about it, when you're driving from A to B each day, especially in Scotland, there's going to be so many places you're going to want to stop and take photographs, or stop and have a coffee, or stop and just smell the roses. You need to allow extra time. So that's what I did when I planned where I was going to expect to be, and therefore where I should book a hotel or an Airbnb. I planned 3 hours driving per day maximum. Some days were even less, because I knew there was going to be places that I was going to be stopping along the way. Castles, for example, you're going to stop and explore. There might be some distilleries that you're going to stop, and you're not going to drink at them, but you might do the tour and take away some sample bottles to taste later. And I'll speak about that in one of the upcoming tips. But the next one, related to planning how far you're going to get each day, is stay in Airbnbs if you can. Now, I know a lot of people discourage Airbnbs, especially in sort of university cities and things like that. I can absolutely understand that, because the Airbnbs can take away from accommodation for locals. However, from my experience in Scotland, in the small towns around close to distilleries or castles and other attractions, there's ample supply of Airbnbs, and as far as I could tell, there wasn't an issue with enough accommodation for locals. I mean, let's face it, Scotland has not a super large population anyway. I could be wrong about all that on those comments, and if I am, feel free to correct me in the comments, and I'll post an update if I'm wrong on that. However, I was able to find some fantastic Airbnbs in most of my stops, and they were all absolutely spotless and had everything you could need. In fact, the one on Isla, I was absolutely just blown away by. The pictures on Airbnb didn't even do it justice. It looked great on Airbnb, but it was absolutely stunning in person, just absolutely immaculate and so tastefully renovated and modernised. So yeah, where possible, stay in Airbnbs, because you'll also get more of the local experience. You're going to be in amongst the locals rather than in the touristy hotel hotspots. And I just think you get a more organic, enjoyable experience, to be honest. So yeah, that's definitely a good one from me. As I said, when it comes to driving, don't concern yourself too much about if you're travelling alone and you're driving yourself around, doing different distillery tours. They will give you takeaway driver's drams. So, because it's very big in Scotland not to drink and drive, but there's no reason that you can't do distillery tours, explore these places. A lot of the places, they'll even pour the whiskey so you can nose them and get the sense of them that way. But as for drinking them, if you're sole driving or you're the designated driver, they will be bottled up or offered as sample bottles pre-packed. So you can take them back to your hotel or Airbnb and sample them later on in the evening when you're no longer driving for the day. So don't let that stop you stopping at different distilleries along the way. I stopped at many that I didn't have on my plan, but they were on the way, literally on the road I'm on. So why wouldn't you? Just on that topic, however, everybody's going to have their favourites that they must do the tasting and taste in the distillery or in the warehouse, whatever it might be. We've all got those. So those are the ones that you need to pre-plan, and you need to make sure that you're either going to be staying in walking distance, or you're going to be booking a local taxi to get there, or using public transport, whatever it is. You need to do what you need to do to make sure that you don't have to drive there. If you're lucky enough to be going with a group, or going with a partner that can drive there and allow you to do the tasting, even better. But yeah, if you're travelling alone, like as I did, then just plan it properly and make sure that you're able to go to those favourite ones and do the tasting with no risk, no issue about driving, that kind of thing. So while we're talking about going to your favourite distilleries, doing the tastings, doing the full tour, doing the warehouse tastings, piece of advice that somebody gave me before my trip, and he was actually talking about doing a tasting at the Guinness warehouse. He said, if they ask for a volunteer, just put your hand up straight away. But I kept that advice. I explored the Guinness warehouse, or storehouse rather, in Dublin, but I didn't do a curated tasting or anything like that. However, when I was at Bunnahabhain, as I mentioned earlier, we would come back to this. When I was at Bunnahabhain, which is one of my favourite distilleries, I did the production distillery tour, and then I did the Warehouse 9 tasting, which anybody who knows Bunnahabhain Distillery knows that the Warehouse 9 tasting is pretty well known around the whisky world. During that Warehouse 9 tasting, there was a call for a couple of volunteers. So what I put my hand up straight away. And I was lucky enough to be one of the 2 volunteers chosen. And the first one got to do the cask draw using the old finger and straw method on the big wooden drawer to do the cask draw for the next whisky we were going to be tasting. And then came my turn, and I got to do the traditional method of you use the straw properly, and perhaps even taste a little bit of whisky by drawing up too much in the wooden straw and providing enough for the tasting. So at the end of this video, I will just drop a few photos of Bunnahabhain and a wee snip of that video where I got to do that cask draw. But that just goes to show, if they call for volunteers, just don't hesitate. Just stick your hand up straight away. You never know what unique experience or memorable experience you'll have. I mean, that cask draw is something that I'll remember for the rest of my life, and so fondly. And I've got a bottle of the, half a bottle now, of that exact cask, bottled from that exact cask that I drew from. And it just so happened to be my favourite whisky of the ones we tasted in Warehouse 9 that day. So yeah, if there isn't a better example of always jumping in to be a volunteer, then I don't know what is. But yeah, I guess my last tip would be, when it's coming to the end of your trip, try to pack as wisely as you can. Obviously, your airlines are going to have different limits on bag weights, etc. If you think you're going to be overweight on your checked baggage, you can always check with the airline, or check with the airline desk if you get to the airport early enough. You might be able to talk them into giving you an extra allowance of an extra checked bag if you need to split some weight, just so that no bag is overweight. If I was at the airport early enough, I would have done that, but in the end I had to pay a little bit because one of my bags was a bit overweight, because I brought back quite a bit of glassware, as well as a few bottles of whisky and many sample bottles as well. So that would be my last tip. Don't do what I did. Get there nice and early, so that if you have to do a little bit of repacking, a little bit of reshuffling, you've got plenty of time to, and don't have to be rushed or flustered and pay any extra money. So there you have it, guys. Those are my tips, tricks, experiences from planning a Scotland trip and enjoying it. If anybody else has any other ideas, thoughts, tips that I haven't thought of or haven't mentioned, feel free to chuck them in the comments. Always happy to collaborate and share other people's experiences and other people's words of advice as well. We're all here. We all love whiskey. We can all offer something different as well. So jump in the comments, chuck us a like. I hope you've subscribed if you like these kind of videos as well as my whiskey reviews. And I'm just going to announce here also, once I reach 50 videos, I'm going to start scoring my whiskey reviews. And I will go back and put scores in for everything I've reviewed thus far. So something to look forward to. Well, until then, if you're planning a trip, happy planning, safe travels, enjoy it. And if not, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.